All right, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Know Your Data Flow, a modern approach to Lineage. Today we have Christopher Glover, Field CTO at BigID, Ernie Ostic, Senior VP of Product at MANTA, and Ron Zurawski, Data Governance Senior Architect at Prolifics. They'll be demonstrating a tactical joint solution that solves modern data lineage problems. Before I turn it over to Christopher, I do want to remind everyone that your cameras are turned off and you are on mute. I will be monitoring the chat function, so please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation. With that being said, I will turn things over to Christopher.
Thank you, Shamishta. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, I think what we wanted to talk today is really a joint solution that we have between us and MANTA and Prolifics. And I'll talk a little bit about BigID, and then we'll talk a little bit about the other products and how these things come together to solve what we call modern lineage. BigID is a modern day registry and metadata management tool. We solve data governance, security problems, and privacy. We have unmatched coverage and we're able to see data wherever it lives, whether it be structured, unstructured, semi-structured data across hundreds of different connectors and technologies. We have deep partnerships like what you're going to see today with MANTA, and then we have connectors for everything else out there. So it's a tool that really gives you this great visibility into your data, how it's connected, how it's being used, and really a component that we wanted to add to this is the lineage component. Next slide. So today, Lineage has been around for a long time, and it's been a challenge, at many points in my career to be able to bring tens of thousands of processes together and document the lineage. And traditionally, we looked at it as like lineage and impact, and sometimes talked about provenance. But today, the ability to use lineage, for many more things that are out there. When we talk about governance, it's about bringing lineage to that catalog so that you have additional context in what you're seeing. It is something that's incredibly important when you start to look at fabrics or data quality problems in the security space. Being able to see not only where the data came from in a breach, but all the other places that data may have gone to in a breach. We solve it with privacy problems, and I'll talk specifically about how BigID brings that in to solve ROPA. But there are many other cases out there. Cloud migration, it comes up all the time for us, where customers want to understand prior to migrating their data to the cloud, where did all this data go? What are all the dependencies for this data, so that when I move it or port it to the cloud, that I actually haven't missed any dependencies that I had for that data, or data that is dependent for that data. So we can take a look at, if we go to the next slide. So specifically how BigID uses lineage data. So as I said, we've been looking at lineage at BigID for probably about a year and a half, and we realize that it's a huge problem. It's not something that you just apply, put 5 developers on, maybe download some open source, and you are able to get to lineage. Certainly not to the maturity and the level that you're going to see with something like MANTA. So our position is really to use the lineage data to augment the tools and applications that we have in BigID. So examples of how we're using lineage information inside of BigID is in the registry or our catalog, and where people go to explore and understand data as it moves through their enterprise. You can explore that and see an object that you might see in the registry, and then see, as you see in this picture here, the dependencies for that object. Off to the right, cut off on the screen, is all the dependence on that data. But it's an easy way to add additional context to the exploration of data, to be able to see, okay, what are the other objects that are related to this object, and what can I see about that, and how can I explore that? Certainly, if you want to see the entire lineage where this object is created, then you can do that in a tool that's meant to do that, which is MANTA. Other uses that we have are records of processing. So from a privacy perspective, there are regulations out there like GDPR that require you to document processing activities that handle personal information. So a record of processing activity is a common thing that companies have to go through, and it's always been a very manual process. It's done by survey. It's going and talking to SMEs that are in the organization to really document that process. But if you have the lineage information in the background, you can start to tie that together and automate that process. So what you see inside of BigID is when you're creating a record of processing, if the lineage information is present, BigID starts to be very suggestive about other applications or processes or data objects that should be included in your record of processing because of their process relationship to the other objects and activities that you've documented in that. And lineage is not constant. Lineage is always being updated in your environment. So it also gives us the ability to be able to alert you when a record of processing has potentially gone stale because there's new information related to the objects and activities in that record of processing. Stewardship is another place. BigID is an omni-consumer of lineage or of metadata. We will consume metadata from wherever we can get it. Lineage is another source that we've added to BigID. And if you have multiple sources of lineage, you're going to want to create really your trusted view of lineage or your applicable view for lineage for different applications. So stewardship is where we allow people to edit the lineage that's inside, lineage information that's inside of BigID. You can use that trusted version of lineage and you can pass it on to other tools inside your environment. But this is what has been so important for us, is to be able to add context to problems that we've had for a long time in data management and security, governance, and add this context of lineage. I think Ernie's going to talk a little more about that context.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. So one of the things, when we put this together and we have this title of Know Your Data Flow, I think it's important to think about lineage as so much more, as Christopher has started to outline, so much more than just a pretty picture, right? There's much more that it brings to the table. And, of course, of my whole career, looking at lineage at one time was just a pure technical thing 20 years ago, where maybe an ETL developer wanted to actually see how their solution is being strung together, to something that's now so much more broad across those different use cases that Christopher had outlined before. And what I'm going to kind of look at here is, beyond that pretty picture, if we think of the individual kinds of problems or solutions that Lineage is delivering, they're delivered and made more clear and more understandable within the context of Lineage. So let's just take a look at a couple of different examples. Understanding how to approach your governance. A lot of times people try to boil the ocean. And if we can start by doing Lineage, by understanding which of our teams are desperate to understand Lineage because they have to answer their regulators, and that team has a set of risk reports. By starting Lineage there, we can get a better idea of what should be our first scope for governance. Right? We always hear about governance projects that fail. Well, we certainly might have an objective to govern everything that's in the company, but we have to find a place to start. Lineage can help you identify that particular most critical inventory and the people who care the most. The same is true for understanding the sources that you have in BCBS 239, and are those the regulated ones that you really have curated already? Or is there surprise sources that you didn't expect that you're going to, get pulled around the collar about from a regulator because you have something that was going into your validation reports on your commercial loans that really should not have been? People are so concerned, and rightly so, about drift in their machine learning initiatives, and wondering whether they have bias that's being introduced. Well, being able to track all the different myriad of file sources that come into your machine learning and AI projects is critical and extremely important. When we talk about privacy, where's it going to? And one of my favorite things in thinking about with Lineage is the point of view. Right? You start at a report because you need to know all the different sources that you have, and you get out to those particular sources and you switch it up, right? So when you're standing on the report, you only look upstream. Then you find those upstream sources and you look downstream. Maybe you'll discover that there's a lot of places that you're sending private data to that you shouldn't be, or that's a big surprise to you. Data quality issues. Everybody has data quality issues. We know it. Everybody's trying to address it. But when you can see them highlighted, imagine that you have a lineage path, which yes, we love to explore them on our in our tools on our desktops. But imagine if you could put it on a plotter and it went down your entire hallway. I know some of you have lineages that could probably cover hundreds of yards. Imagine if you then at least had a yellow or red sticky note that identified all the different places where you have quality issues. You could more easily prioritize which ones are super critical for you. Being able to highlight critical transformations and reuse them, especially important when we're doing migrations or modernization of your applications. And the next one of uncovering dead ends. Right, this happens, especially if you have a legacy application. It was written in 2001. Now you want to upgrade it, move it up to the cloud, perhaps. How much of that model are you still using? Do you have to lift and shift everything, or can you just move those things that are most critical and that you're still using? Lineage will help you expose that. And as far as Lineage is concerned, you want to fix things before they break. Right? Lineage is going to help you keep that entire pipeline of analytics up and running. And you want to check things before you release the code, not after you're running it if it could break. And Lineage that's done by code analysis will help you with that. Yeah. Things like overloaded assets, being able to see all of the different nodes and which ones have the highest amount of access, possibly could help you with bottlenecks, or also find the most important assets that you have. And certainly being able to see if you have redundant flows, which many of you do, especially if you do mergers and acquisitions. There may be similar types of flows with different tools that are answering and moving the same kinds of data. Maybe some of those are candidates for removal. So understanding your issues in the context of Lineage is certainly critical, and again, not just a pretty picture. Next slide, please.
Oh, I was going to just add one thing there, Ernie.
Yeah, please, Christopher, go back.
It goes both ways with what you're saying with context there, is that, context or Lineage strengthens context. And you saw a little bit of that when I was describing what BigID does, but then also context strengthens Lineage, which is now you can, as you described it with the sticky notes, you can color your lineage to to uncover different aspects of that lineage, which is, are you going to put a security lens on it, or a data governance lens on it, or a data redundancy lens on it? It's this context that we're passing back and forth that really makes these two different applications of Lineage really light up, and it brings it to this modern version of Lineage, is what we're describing.
Absolutely. It sure does. Thank you. Anything to add, Ron?
No, please proceed.
All right, terrific. Next slide, please. So just real quickly here at MANTA, and the complement that we provide to BigID along with Prolifics is we're helping our customers achieve regulatory compliance and governance. We shorten their delivery schedules, particularly in those modernization and scenarios. And in particular, MANTA is helping our customers with end-to-end lineage. This means not just lineage for one technical solution that you might have up in the cloud, but all of it. Bringing together even your mainframe information to your ETL tools, to your intermediate data warehouses that are still existing, into Hadoop if you invested in there, the stored procedures and things that eventually you bring to the cloud, and out to your reporting systems. And being able to have that end-to-end lineage is what MANTA is bringing to the table. Next slide, please. How does MANTA do it? We look at your code. We crunch code. We parse it. We go through it, look at your ETL, look at your SQL statements. We follow the individual columns and pull out transformations where we can, so that you can surface those technical syntax elements without having to get on the phone or having to go dig through code. And finally, enabling deep lineage inspection and analytics, and of course, cross-sharing for active metadata with ourselves and BigID and other solutions that you're implementing. Ron, over to you.
Thank you, Ernie. Hello, everyone. At Prolifics, we've built an integrator that allows data movement between MANTA and BigID. What questions are we answering? Where's your data going? Are you regulatory compliant? The integrator sits between MANTA and BigID. It takes the lineage from MANTA and supplies it to BigID. BigID goes out and reviews and classifies information, and the Prolifics integrator then takes that and provides it back to MANTA. Next slide, please. For the demo I'm going to emulate data moving in from a flat file, moving through several different systems. I've used different technologies, and we have those all sitting in place. We're using a SQL script to move data from a flat file to Postgres. We're using DataStage to move it from Postgres to DB2 and then on to Oracle. So let's go ahead and let's go into the actual demo, shall we? I'm going to go ahead and take control of the share. And I'm going to start and minimize. All right, I believe I'm sharing my screen now. Is that correct, Ernie?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Let me share the screen and go. How about now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So what I've pulled up here is I've pulled up the MANTA Lineage viewer, and I've gone ahead and listed the entire system I showed in the PPT. I'm starting with a flat file here, and then through a SQL script loading into Postgres, and then I've used DataStage to pull from Postgres and move into DB2. And then I've again used DataStage to pull from the DB2 into the Oracle table. So I'm going to go ahead and go back over here to Postgres. This is where we'll be focusing today. And we have, for example, a member table, and we're just doing a simple lineage through the SQL into the table and then back out again through, pardon me, through DataStage. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hop over to BigID, and we're going to assume the data has been pulled in. It has, and we're going to go into the BigID catalog, and we're going to look at that same member table, and we're going to look at the columns. Let me just rearrange this just slightly. And then as we scroll up and down, we can see that BigID has analyzed and classified a variety of the information within that member table. For example, SSIN, it's classified as Social Security, it's identified those things, and then it does that with the other columns. In every case, we have a classification where it is appropriate. So now let's go back over to how does the MANTA system work? I'm sorry, the Prolifics integrator in between the two systems. What the Prolifics integrator does is it's controlled from within BigID. There are three simple buttons that we will push. One button to have MANTA analyze and pull information into flat files, another one to pull it into BigID, and then a third go to take it from BigID and put it back into MANTA as PII. So what does that look like within MANTA's flow viewer? If we go back to MANTA's flow viewer, I've pre-staged this, and we can now see that the tags are within that member table. And if you're a business analyst and you're not working in your area, your normal area, you're out of your comfort zone, having this type of information available and being able to say, hey, here are the columns that are identified as being restricted is, you know, a real godsend, I think. And then, of course, one of the interesting features we've put into this is I can hover over the little tag and I can click on the BigID URL, which then allows me to go back into BigID. And brings me right back to that table where I can continue to do an analysis and look at greater detail. So that concludes the demo. Go ahead and let's go back to the presentation. All right, this is just a little more information about Prolifics. In this case, Prolifics has experts. We have them in various business fields and technologies. With their knowledge, we build accelerators that allow you to do these types of integrations and add additional value to your data. Thank you. Let me turn it back over to the team.
All right, thank you so much, Ron. Just a reminder, if anyone attending has any questions, please enter them into the Q&A function at the very top of the screen. Any final thoughts from Ron, Christopher, or Ernie?
No, thank you, Ron. That was great. I think the key thing here is the value that these three solutions, bring together. The expertise that Prolifics offers, the integration between the two, making, classic statement of it's greater than the individual parts. But I think that's really the significant piece here in terms of looking at the different technologies.
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic integration for people who are trying to solve this problem in a modern way. There are many promises out there about how you're going to solve your lineage, but you'll find quickly that they're kind of simple and they're not well thought out. But BigID and Manta have really come together here with Prolifics to offer a solution that is giving you great visibility into your data and this extended visibility with your lineage and the ability to pass that context and show you things in Lineage that you wouldn't see with other tools, and show you things in BigID that you wouldn't see with other governance and security and privacy tools out there. And of course, Prolifics is there to help companies through this. While I would love to say that just Manta and BigID and you push a button and all of a sudden you have all the lineage that you need, it's not often that easy. Companies have tens of thousands of flows that they're trying to document and trying to include and trying to catalog the data and bring that lineage context to it. Sometimes it takes a partner like Prolifics to help you make that happen.
All right,
Thank you, Christopher. Appreciate that.
We've got a couple of questions that came through the chat here. So first one is, what other ETL applications are supported along with data stage? Who wants to take that one?
Sure, I'll take that one. We support all the major ETL tooling that's out there. Certainly, please, I can put up the website link in just a moment, but certainly Data Stage and Informatica and Microsoft SSIS and Oracle Data Integrator. We recently added support for Azure Data Factory and Fivetran, and there's others.
Right. I was simply trying to make the demonstration easy and quick so that we could move on to questions fast.
Yeah,
right,
sure.
well,
It was Data Stage in the illustration, but the others are fully supported as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just working on an SSIS package in Manta the other day.
All right, looks like we've got another question here. Can mainframe JCL jobs also be parsed?
So that's a great question. And Manta parses JCL, but in the context of analyzing COBOL. So that in the effort that we do to go through COBOL code, obviously to understand the individual steps, but even more importantly, the DD cards that specify the source and targets of different files. I know I'm dating myself a bit here, but that is critical that we look at the JCL. So not JCL exclusively, but as its importance to a COBOL application.
Right.
Awesome. All right, got one more question that came through, maybe two more. Can you gather lineage as a result of FTP jobs?
Another wonderful question. And we don't do any automated things for FTP, right? Precisely because there's just so many myriad of ways that those kinds of things can be coded, put in scripts, put in shells, batch files, depending upon your platform, or people that just go in and decide they're going to do their own human-based FTP in a console session. So MANTA offers facilities to make it very easy. We call it Open MANTA. Very easy to define your own lineage, right? Draw your own objects, draw your own arrows that say, and connections that say this data set goes to this data set, and you can define those parameters. And then, of course, once it's part of an automated scenario, like, for instance, an ETL tool that picks up that file afterwards, then the lineage would continue in an automated fashion from there.
Yeah, I think there's also additional context that you get from, BigID has a concept of inferred metadata or inferred lineage. So because we have the lineage context and because we have data context and we have other applications inside of BigID that show you the similarities of data sets across your enterprise, that's the value of having multiple contexts. In BigID, that's a graph, that's a multi-semantic graph that allows you to see all the different contexts at once and apply algorithms that sit on top of it, and it can start to infer where you have a gap in lineage, and you may have to document that manually, either inside of MANTA or in the data flows or stewardship area of BigID. You can document those gaps that you have in lineage where you may not be able to pull them in from a process. Another example I would give is inside of BigID, we do look at things like activities that might come from a database like Snowflake, where as Ernie said, is like people do their own little FTP jobs. One of those things is called CTAS, which is select. God, I'm forgetting what this is. Select table or create table as select from, and so people do this all the time where they create a new table of data from a SQL statement that they have in a database like Snowflake. BigID captures some of that and is able to say, yeah, we've got some additional lineage here that came from somebody who did a SQL action. So you have other sources for this type of lineage, and that's one of the things that BigID does, is that we source this type of lineage from lots of different places. We're an omni-consumer of metadata. We will take, steal, borrow lineage and metadata from anywhere we can get it.
Awesome. One more question for you guys. Can you configure other data tags to be identified through the lineage or critical data elements that are not PII?
Do you want to take that one, Ron, or want me to?
We certainly can. There's I think there's PHI, is that correct, Christopher? And there is, of course, your primary key tags and those sorts of things. They can certainly be configured. In this case, we tried to keep the demo simple, but either Ernie or Christopher, you can certainly expand on that.
Yeah, I can start. We pass all that context, so it's configurable in the integration application. In this case, Ron, like Ron said, he did something simple, which is we just pass the classifiers for personal information. But we can pass quality scores, we can pass risk scores, we can pass other types of profile information. So nearly anything in context that's inside of BigID can be passed to MANTA to those active tags. You want to add anything, Ernie, to that, or?
Just that the active tags is a production capability in MANTA that Prolifics and BigID have come together to maximize. But things like the colors and what they indicate are ultimately a control that anyone who's using MANTA can adjust.
Exactly.
All right, great. Well, that concludes our presentation today. Thank you everyone for joining. Please reach out to Christopher, Ernie, or Ron with any additional questions or to set up a one-on-one meeting, and enjoy the rest of your day.